Now, to run through some of the stories making the headlines, a great friend of today's News Talk and of free speech. It's leader of the STP, William Clouston. William, good to see you again. A voice of common sense, I think. I wonder what you make of this one. I've got a vested interest. Both my parents are Estonian. Prisoners could serve their time in Estonia. Basically, I can't believe it. At the same time as thousands of real prisoners are being released from UK jails to, in part, put people who said bad things, hurty words and stupid things, admittedly, on social networks. What's happening, William? What's going wrong with this country?
Well, it's a complete mess. And as usual, the core problem is lack of investment. And what's happened is that the capacity that we need to lock up criminals and keep ourselves safe has not been built. And so they've got a massive crisis. Labour wanted to crack down on the illegality and civil disturbance we had, and by locking people up very, very quickly. They've introduced plans to let off basically 5,500 people early. So people are now serving 40% of their sentences and being let out immediately. And the whole thing is in chaos. Nothing surprises me, Lembit, about this. This is another crazy scheme. It's probably a gimmick. I don't think it'll actually happen, but it'll certainly raise some headlines.
I'm appalled that Estonia, which by definition has space in its prisons because it doesn't have many prisoners, even as a proportion of its population, that it might just be the dumping ground for problem people from here. What happens to them? Have they explained, do they have to come back after they've served their term, or do they just get released in Estonia to wander around there?
I think they'd probably come back, and certainly from what I've read, some of the Estonian politicians are quite keen on this. I suppose if they can make some money out of it, they might. Remember, Britain gives a lot of money to a lot of states to solve its own problems. We give £450 million to the French to solve a problem on the Channel crossings. They're not doing it. So nothing would surprise me. I mean, one way we could ease things in the British prison population is by deporting foreign criminals. A lot of states and around the world, a lot of states actually deport you immediately if you're convicted of a crime back to where you came from. We don't do that. So if you look at the proportion of British prisons that is comprised by foreigners, quite high. So that's one way we might look at easing things.
Yes. At the same time, though, you just mentioned the French there. Maybe that's a good case in point, because the French minister said that Britain very rarely expels people from the UK. Said it publicly. In other words, once you get in the UK, you can probably get to stay. Now, Downing Street says that's not true, but it's clearly the mindset of the French. And that rather belies the fact that when you throw money at a problem like that, like in this case, the French, that they seriously think they're going to have to take all these people back.
Yeah, well, the French Interior Minister made three comments, all of which I think are true. He said that the grant rate for asylum is very high here. It is certainly higher than it is in France or Germany. And so he's right, actually. If you claim asylum in the UK and you arrive unsolicited, you're very, very likely to stay. He's right about that. He also said that the broader policy in the UK was acting as a magnet. Obviously, he's right about that. And the third thing he said was that he said it's easier for people to work in the black economy and unvetted, basically, in the labour market in the UK than it is in France. That also is true. So the government's reaction to that, the spokesman for the Labour Party said, basically he was in denial. I mean, he said these things aren't true. And then he came out with the usual smash the gangs rhetoric, which is the only response the Labour Party have put to this problem. And it's not got anywhere, has it? Because on the numbers, there are more people crossed illegally, unsolicited in the Channel this year than last year. So the problem is getting worse under Labour.
And I can't see why anyone should take seriously a Labour Party whose leader was in large part responsible for opening up the benefit system in a way that's underlined and motivated people to come here in the first place.
Quite right. So this problem of unsolicited arrivals will only get bigger unless we change the incentives. It's basic economics, basic human incentives. Basically, if you make it worthwhile to cross the Channel, and arrive here and probably stay here, people will continue to do it. And until we have a government that understands this, and the Tory party didn't really understand it, most Tory parliamentarians were reluctant to do the Rwanda thing, which was a gimmick. We can solve this, Lembit. We can solve it if we want to. You know what we should do? We should do what the SDP advises, which is to set up a large centre on Ascension Island. Immediately, if you arrive here unsolicited, you get taken there, and you never come back to the UK. You go back to where you come from, or a third country. That would stop the flow overnight. No one is going to pay €5,000 to go to Ascension. It's not going to happen.
Unless you happen to be particularly interested in southern Atlantic wildlife, I suppose. Just one other... Yeah, I mean, I'd like to go there once, but I'd like to have a return ticket. Same as the Falklands, really, or Malvinas, depends where you stand on that. One other group which may be expelled, possibly quicker than the migrants, hereditary peers. The Labour Party's made a big thing of this, even though I don't think it affects most people in their daily lives. But there could be a way back. They could be converted into life peers, which is part of the process. How important is this?
It's actually quite important in principle. I think the Lords is loved by many. It's part of our system. And actually, in terms of the job it does a pretty good job. There's a lot of expertise, and some of the quality of the debates in the Lords is actually better than the Commons. But the problem is that the hereditary principle can't be justified. I think Labour are right in this. The problem is that Starmer, before the election, promised to abolish the Lords. And now what they're doing effectively is getting rid of hereditaries, over half of which are Tories, probably to assist the bill's passage through Parliament. I think it's a little bit of chicanery, basically, on the part of the Labour Party. They're not seriously looking at what upper chamber we should have. What they're doing is removing probably 50 Tories and replacing them with Labour cronies. I don't like the system as it is, actually, Lembit. I think it's a complete mess. You either have hereditaries or political cronies, and we could do a lot better, I think.
Yeah, that's the big problem here. I'm worried that Labour's now packing the system in ways which it's trying to use to ensure that they stay in a bit longer. Adding all that together, how good a week or bad a week has this been for British politics and British society?
Well, it's not a very good week. I mean, you know, the Labour Party has had a terrible start. I mean, you know, got elected with a huge majority, and they've made mistake after mistake after mistake. The removal of winter fuel payments to pensioners, I think, is just politically completely inept when they bought off large amounts of their supporters and the public sector unions with large pay rises. I think some of which were justified, but some weren't. So politically inept, we continue to be badly misgoverned, Lembit.
Nige says they'll have to be renamed the Suspension Islands. I like it. We've got live wires watching the show and the live wire on it. Thank you. That is one of the great prime ministers we haven't had yet, William Clouston, leader of the STP.